Guys, I want to welcome you to another episode of the Advisory Board podcast. I've got with me a guest that I've really enjoyed getting to know, Vaughn Sigmon. And I want to tell you a little bit about him, then I'm going to let him tell you a little bit about him. But you might know Vaughn. In fact, we've discovered we have a really good mutual friend in the franchising space, which was a fun discovery. So maybe that'll come up a little later. But Vaughn, things you might know about Vaughn if you've ever bumped into him. He's the co-founder of Results Driven Leadership. He coached a lot of executives, senior leaders in how to better lead and grow businesses. He was an executive at CarMax. I don't know if you've ever heard of them before. Helped grow them to a $2 billion company, 3,000 employees. Top 100 workplaces in America, kind of a place. I think you've heard of them. But he's also, though, Vaughn's been a franchise owner. He's sold franchises. He's been a master franchise owner, which I did not know about him until we started getting to know each other. So great fit for this audience. Vaughn, what else should everybody know about you before we jump into our topic today?
Well, I retired at the ripe age of 56, and like many franchise owners, I had enough of the corporate life, and decided to go out on my second chapter of my career. And I was thinking about how I best would be personally satisfied, and ended up with this concept. My career had been mostly successful due to my ability to train, develop, promote people, work on people's careers, their skill sets, provide them the knowledge and the tools and the support to get better and be a bigger contributor to the organization. And, it was at CarMax that my group of stores was called the People Factory, because I think before I retired, I'd promoted 26 or 27 regional vice presidents out of my region, by a long shot, more than any other regional vice president had ever been able to get around to. And people just clamored to come get into this environment. And I just took that environment of development, commitment to personal learning, commitment to the coaching of the individuals who were looking to get ahead. It was necessary to grow the business. You cannot scale a business without scaling your people. And so I took that, turned it into my own business, which is Results Driven Leadership. The franchise that I owned was very much around coaching and developing businesses. And so it was a natural fit for me. As I moved through my business ownership, I discovered that I really liked the part of sales development and leadership development more than what the franchise was providing. And ended up selling the franchise, getting out of that business, devoted my energy solely to results-driven leadership. I've now have 6 coaches working with me now. The business has grown tremendously, primarily through referrals, which is an honor to me. Yeah. And I just, at the end of the day, I am stoked always if I can impart one nugget of information that somebody can turn around and get better at what they do every day. I can rest my head at night like I accomplished something. So that's my passion. It's been said many times, when you are doing what you love, you'll never work another day the rest of your life. And I haven't worked in almost 10 years.
Well, that's a wonderful place to be, honestly, and what a great place to apply. I'm sure all the lessons that you learned as you were at CarMax and many other places before that, but it sure is rewarding. I mean, it's why I started coaching athletics. It's why I loved, I've done several engagements as a professional business consultant, and it's been super rewarding to see people actually listen and change behaviors, and then see the results, and then get the thank you notes. And I'd rather get the thank you note than the check, honestly. Sometimes that's just as rewarding, if not more so.
Absolutely. And, our mutual connection, he's a perfect example of what you just described. He's a young man that I met 8 years ago. He knew nothing about nothing, put his faith into my direction for him. And you and I both know how successful Trevor Rapley's become at franchisefilming.com, to put a plug in for Mr. Trevor, who was an amazing artist. in the filming world, does a great job. And you know, as you and I both know, is one of the most genuine people on earth. But he was working with a part-time person in a small part-time office filming weddings. And now he's got a multi-million-dollar business with dozens and dozens of employees, very deep into the franchise world. He found his niche. He's doing a great job. And every time I sit down and talk to Trevor, that's my reward, is for all the success he's getting. Yeah, he pays me every month and has for years, but that's not the satisfaction. It's the joy of watching that young man and his business and his people grow.
Yeah, no, I agree with you 100%. Well, so shifting gears, you and I, as we were prepping to talk about something totally different, decided upon in a moment of serendipity that there's a different topic we're going to talk about today. So, guys, what Vaughn and I want to talk about today is often not spoken about much, but it's such a key aspect in success in franchising in any business. Doesn't matter what it is, whether it's a franchise or not, but is selling. Like how do you sell? How do you approach this scary sales process? And the reason it came up was we were talking about how so few people in franchising know how to sell. And that's what makes or breaks a franchise owner. That's what makes or breaks a franchisor, or a franchise consultant, right? Is knowing this process. And there's kind of a stigma. Vaughn, you've been doing this even longer than I have. What would you say are some of the stigmas that people have that make them, kind of look down upon, or maybe be afraid to talk about selling?
Well, so there's the big problem to overcome is the stigma that I don't want to be salesy. I don't want to be pushy. I can't put myself in a position to make somebody buy something. And that's the furthest thing from reality of what selling in today's world is about. And selling today is far easier than when I started learning to sell in the 70s. It's, you had to be much more aggressive. You had to have all these techniques and this closing jujitsu and all these things. And today it's very consultative. It's all about removing the barrier of trust. It's a 5-step, 4-step process, depending on the business. If you follow this process quite carefully, rinse and repeat in a very non-aggressive way. In fact, that's one thing, that's another stigma that has to be understood. I managed over 1,000 salespeople when I left CarMax. And yes, that's one of the most stigmatized industries in the world, is a shady used car salesperson, which, CarMax was the opposite of that. And that was a great deal of the reason why they're a $30 billion company today. I had my little piece of it out here on the West Coast, but our best salespeople were not the quintessential picture of what most people think of a salesperson. They were much more of the heart of a teacher. They were much more interested in helping somebody. They wanted to discover what somebody was looking for. And it's not the gregarious, outgoing, pushy, gotcha kind of person. You can be, let me tell one of my favorite stories. And this was one of the aha moments for me in sales. It was about 20 years ago. And as part of my training with CarMax, I had to run a location, and they made me the general manager of their location in Orlando, Florida. And they had fired the previous manager. And it was funny that the regional manager of Florida had said, okay, I want you to wait in the parking lot. I'm going to fire Bob at 10 o'clock. And at 11 o'clock, I want you to come in. I'll introduce you to everybody, and then I'm out of there. I said, okay, sounds like a plan. So he fired Bob at 10. At 11 o'clock, he calls me up on the cell phone. I come walking in, and I'm walking around the showroom, and I'm meeting all the salespeople. And, everybody's a little bit in shock, but here's the new guy. I got a big grin on my face, shaking hands and kissing babies. And there's this one guy standing off in the corner. And I notice he's kind of shying away. He's not really trying to come over and engage in any of these conversations. And I finally woke up over this gentleman and introduced myself, and he literally is staring at my shoes. And I'm thinking, oh my God, who is this guy? Mm-hmm. And I started asking questions. How long you been here? Been here 8 years. Well, you've been selling for 8 years? No. This is my first day of selling. Oh, what did you do before? I was the truck driver. Okay, great. Good luck to you. I'm saying externally, internally, I'm saying, what idiot
Yeah.
decided to make the truck driver a salesperson?
Right.
And so as time went on, and so everybody can follow along, CarMax had a very defined sales process.
Mhm.
Any successful sales organization has a very defined sales process with the ability to adapt your own personality and approach to it. But there's defined steps that you have to follow to end up with a successful sale. That's the foundation. That's the blueprint of success.
Yeah.
So John was one of these guys, and I used DISC very extensively, as did CarMax. That's where I was introduced 20 plus years ago to the DISC profile. It's one of the best windows into a person's personality on the planet. Um, and come to find out, John is a fairly high S, or stability. And those are very non-confrontational individuals. They don't like to be aggressed at, and they don't like to be aggressive with anybody else. They're very much about everybody else, very little ego in a high S. So John was very much this person. The opposite of what one might think about in the stigma of being a successful salesperson. So come to find out, John was one of our top salespeople very quickly. Why? Because he just followed the process, which what he was very, very good at is we had 5 questions that were discovery questions with some probing prompts along the way. John just did what we showed him how to do. He followed the training with he was almost a little bit on the spectrum of a personality. He was very awkward socially, but he did exactly what he was told to do, did it very well, was one of the easiest low maintenance salespeople we had on a team of over 100 salespeople. And John would take a customer, put them through the process. They'd walk out in the car a couple hours later, rinse and repeat. And it was like that. This was my aha moment. You don't have to be Mr. Outgoing and Mr. Personality or Miss Personality. You don't have to be aggressive. You don't have to have all these techniques. Just be interested in the customer, be interested in lowering the barrier of trust, which is really simple. And it takes anybody can learn to do it. Literally anybody can learn to do it if they're willing to apply themselves, but they've got to rid themselves of that mindset or that opinion that selling is pushing and it's the furthest thing from the truth.
Yeah, you know what I think? When people ask me sometimes, "What's your favorite sales book?" Because I've been in sales, coaching in sales, I don't know, since 2000. So was that 23, almost 25 years? That's exciting.
It
I'm getting
is.
older. The white hair is coming through now, but the,
I can relate to that.
yeah, you can. You got a good head of hair still. That's why I'm wearing a hat. So yeah, jealousy bleeding through. But one of my favorite books on sales is actually Dale Carnegie, How to Win Friends and Influence People. People don't think of it as a sales book, but this because most people don't understand the true nature of sales. And I've been in it for so long that I feel like I'm kind of wired this way, and it works, which is why I chatted. I'm going to outline and write that book, because people that there are some great books out there like Challenger Selling, incredible book. I love spin selling. It's a great. I avoided spin selling forever because the acronym. I hated spinning. I thought that was all about how to like manipulate, but it had nothing to do with that. But these are great classic sales books. They're a bunch, right? But at the core of everything, we break down like how do you sell? It's all about you got to build trust and rapport with somebody, and then you also have to listen and understand what they actually need. That's why I love the discovery process of spin selling. Like it's really I just need to figure out what you need. And then you need to be honest with yourself and with them enough. That's why I like Dale Carnegie's principle: show genuine interest in people, right? You can throw some Covey in there as well, like emotional bank accounts and things. Like really, it comes down to do you have enough chips in the jar that they're willing to accept your opinion if it differs from theirs to be guided. But it's more important that you understand what they need, so you guide them to what they're looking for rather than guide them to what you want them to buy. Like there's a very fundamental difference there, and there are a lot of people that still have it wrong, where it has nothing to do with the customer. It's not a win-win-win. Going back to Covey, right? It's a win for them, and So let's break it down a little bit, because we talked about a few things. We talked about process. I think it would behoove us to go back to that. But I want to talk about like the approach a little bit together with you, Vaughn. And the reason why we want to talk about this is in franchising specifically, the most consistently high performing people in almost every franchise concept, except for maybe retail, like quick serve, things like that, because it's marketing and whoever walks in the door, then it's training your people to make everyone feel like they're your only customer when they're ordering their food and you're interacting with them. But aside from putting that aside, everybody else, the highest success rates are going to generally be tied to people that know actually how to sell. So let's break down selling a little, Vaughn. Let's talk about some of the basic fundamentals that people can train and people can use. We talked about the stigmas already. That's not selling. I tell people that all the time. But what are some of the core things that people need to understand so they can actually approach selling with success?
Well, and in going through this with you, Dave, I hope to erase some of the preconceived self-limiting thoughts that people have about selling. So first of all, the first mindset that you have to have in order to be successful in sales is I have to be empathetic. It's about the customer. It's not about me. It's not about me making a sale. Take the pressure off yourself. You're not here to sell anything. I'm here to help someone. They've got a need. I need to discover what that need is. They wouldn't be talking to me in the first place. They've got a need. They want to do business with somebody. And there's three elements that are exactly the same in every single sale. You got a product, you have a need, and you have you. And with that you part, that's the most important part. And it comes from how you approach it between your ears. Is if I go in with a caring mindset approach, I'm empathetic. I show empathy before expertise. Please write that one down. Show empathy before expertise. And if you really come in, ask great questions, and those can be designed for whatever specific business that you're working in, that display of empathy comes from asking a lot of questions and not going to a pitch, not going to a solution until you've had enough time. It generally takes 30 to 45 minutes to get all the way there, but they're going to make a decision on you in about the first 7 minutes.
Yeah.
And so the more you come in with an empathetic approach, turn the tables on them, in that I'm more interested in you than what I do, you've got a huge lead on the success of not only helping this person out, but making a sale. So empathy for expertise, have the proper mindset that I'm not here to sell anything. I'm just here to help. I'm here for solutions, not to take your money. And if you go in with that mindset with the proper structured questions, you're going to be successful almost every time, as long as your product satisfies the need of this individual and you can present it properly.
I love it, Vaughn. And one thing I would add to that last bullet, if I'm here to help you, the way I've always thought of this is I'm going to help you whether or not I'm going to get any money from you, right? And it's hard for people to think that way. Like, there are hardcore salespeople out there who are going to say, you're probably a terrible salesperson. You'll never close. Like, and that's baloney. And the thing is, you and I could both brag on all sorts of stuff, I'm sure. And I don't mean to be this as a brag. Like, I've always been top 1 to 5%, depending upon the organization, right? I've always been a top performer in anything I do that way. But I've also never been the pushy sales guy. I've always approached it this way, which is why when we were chatting, I was like, wait, we need to talk about this instead today, because we got to dispel these illusions people have about what salesmanship is, what selling is, not memorize pitches. In fact, the word pitch should only be used to smear on boats, to fix leaks, and to throw baseballs. Like, it's the only two places pitching has any place in the world anymore. I hear people say, well, go ahead and give me your pitch. And I'm like, you know what? Like, I don't even want to talk to you because you don't even get how this is supposed to work. But I'll share a story on that. Medtronic, I was meeting with their chief legal officer in another life. I was in town with somebody else. Somebody set an appointment. I stopped by. We never met each other. It was short notice. And I sit in his office, and the guy's name's Mike Jarrow. Really sharp, really nice guy. But he was busy. So he's like, oh, what is this? Oh, yeah, come on in. And he sits down. He goes like this. He goes, go ahead and give me your pitch. It was an important dude. This is a multi-billion dollar, like, they're a huge organization. And so, and I said, Mike, that's not how it works. He's like, what? I was like, no, like I don't even know if I should give you a pitch. Like I need to learn about what you guys do. Like, can you tell me a little bit about this and start talking to me about that? And you should have seen the look on his face. He was like, oh, like that's a thing. Like he was just expecting me to throw numbers at him. So yeah, so I just sat back. Then I was leaning in, listening to him, and he relaxed and he told me all about their stuff. And they became a customer of ours from a cold sales meeting that somebody set and threw me into before I caught a flight on the way home. That's not, again, not like a wow, I'm so awesome, but the thought process that people have of, oh, it's a salesperson is and you can diffuse all that tension and irritation, and you can actually get to the bottom line. And he had some serious challenges with his translation processes with his patents. That's the industry I was in at the time. So we just dug into some of those things and eventually found a lot of need that he had, that we had special, we had tools and resources to help him. He's like, oh, I would really like that. And it became a conversation of what do you need and what could I do to help. That's always how I approach it, and it's never failed to at least establish some respect and rapport, and eventually maybe a referral, even if they weren't ready to buy and they weren't the right fit.
Yeah. So, and to that point, I don't care what industry you're in. You and I were mentioning earlier that maybe other than, quick serve, but you're going to be selling something. Even in hiring great people, you're selling. The interview process is discovering whether this is the right person. But if it is, you have to be able to present your company in a way that during this interview process, they're going to trust you in order to come on board with you. And as hard as it is to find great people, when you find one, you have to have a great sales approach to bring them aboard. A lot of people don't think about hiring that way, but it's a very important part of bringing on great associates or great employees with your organization. But to your point, I've got one client who is in biomed, and 15 PhDs, masters of engineering. These people are the furthest thing from salespeople. I mean, they're the opposite of what anybody would ever think a salesperson is. From just you look at their resume, you look at their accomplishments, you look at their personality. They're very much
Engineers,
introverted sort of people.
Oh, yeah.
But with the right approach, they can talk to any prospective client and present a understanding of what this client needs, walk through a defined process, then deliver whether they have the solution or not. It works 100% of the time. So and there's a second part of that is learning to sell is one thing, learning how to manage salespeople. There's another stigma attached to that.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you right now, I'm going to make somebody mad, but I'm going to say it anyway. And I've fact checked this with counterparts all across the globe. I can tell you, I'm connected with a lot of people that do what I do in Europe and Australia and the Middle East and South America. The biggest mistake people make in creating a sales team is promote my best salesperson to sales manager.
Yes. No. So let me just fact check that with you right now. That is usually the biggest mistake I see made in any organization, whether or not it's the sales organization.
Exactly right.
Same place, different circumstance from the Medtronic story. In the translation world, you make money when you translate per word, right? That's how people get paid. But now, when you're on salary, you get paid a salary, right? And bonuses if you hit things. But the problem people have is these people love language and they love translation, but they want to make more money. And the only way to make more money in that industry is getting promoted to manage the team. But here's the crazy thing: is out of 10 different language groups, all of them had been promoted from within. Like, you're the best translator, so now manage the team. You're the best salesperson, now manage the team. And guess what? They were all miserable. They were miserable. And so what we would find is their team productivity was down because no one was being managed, because they were taking projects and translating them rather than managing and building and training their teams. And it was consistent, 9 out of 10. They all were the same. So in sales, I see the same thing. People who are great at sales love the chase, the hunt, the reward, the relationships. Great salespeople love the relationships and the rapport they're building with their clientele. As soon as you start putting a row of bureaucracy between what they love and what they're getting paid to do, I see them, almost all of them, drown, and they don't want to do it anymore.
Yeah, and it's, there's you hit on something I think is really important, is understanding the benchmarks for who's going to be a good fit for a particular position in any organization. And to your point, the best at anything may not necessarily translate to the best at leading a group of people that are very good at doing that particular function. And understanding the dynamics of who makes a great manager, who makes a great leader, who makes a great salesperson. That's where you use personality assessments or pre-employment assessments to determine, based on their behavior profiles, whether they're going to be a good fit or not. Use some science to make that decision. But let's get back to selling. What makes a great salesperson? There is no one size fits all in that. It depends on the industry. And it depends on your audience. And so again, there are some born salespeople. Maybe 1 or 2% of all salespeople are born natural salespeople.
Yeah.
Everybody else struggles
Mhm.
unless they've been taught the steps of becoming a successful problem solver.
Right.
And once that aha moment happens, they embrace that and will then turn their approaches into, I'm just here to help figure out what you need. And if I can help you, I'm going to. And you've done it, I've done it dozens of times. If I've done my job properly, and I can, in fact, my services can, in fact, I close 100% of those.
Mhm.
But I also turn down a fair amount because what they want is not what I do or what I'm even comfortable doing. For example, many people treat training like a car wash.
Mhm.
I drive in, I drive out, I'm trained, right? And it does not work that way. So if somebody wants to hire me, pay me $15,000 for a weekend seminar, and they think that their team is going to be trained from a day and a half of hanging out with Vaughn Sigmon, they're wrong. I don't want their money because it's a waste of money.
Mhm.
And certainly a waste of their people's time. They're going to retain maybe 20% of that 2 weeks from now. And so understand this. I'm going to wrap this back around to selling. It's a learned process. It's a learned behavior. It's a learned approach. And as long as you're practicing it and willing to fail a little bit
Mhm.
and learn from those failures, try it again, you'll eventually, in not too long a time, be able to be very successful at it. And once you're successful at it, it's like riding a bicycle.
Mhm.
Now I know how to do it. I can do it in any environment. I'll do it socially. I'll do it hiring people. I'll do it selling my contractor services. I'll do it selling my housekeeping service. I can do it with anybody.
Mhm. Yeah.
And I will win over my competition 100% of the time, because believe me, your competition is not using that approach, are they, Dave?
Yeah, unless they were trained by you or me, right? Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. So, well, let's take it back a step though, because we started with step one, and I 100% agree with you about step one on this, which is we begin with empathy, selling with empathy, selling with trust. It's all about understanding what's going on in their world, really truly understanding their challenges. You can call them pain points. That's just fine. And then there's a point in this process where, now that you've understood the landscape, right? If you go to spin selling, the situational awareness, and then you understand the problem, right? Then you understand how, I always forget the I and the N, what they stand for, like the actual acronyms, but you have to be able to make a connection between the problem and the impact of the problem in the organization and them personally, right? And this is where some people say, well, now you're manipulating. Not even close. Sometimes when I talk to people and they're like, hey, Dave, I've got this issue. I'm not selling any franchise units. And I start talking to them and digging in a little bit, or they're like, my units, my franchisees can't, their close rate on paint jobs is like 15%. They're not making enough money. They're not successful. I never say, oh, great, well, I got a solution for that. I dig deeper to figure out, well, how are they selling? What's going on? And what are they doing? What are their processes? What does your proposal look like? How do you guys approach them? What's your follow-up sequence? Like, I just need to understand. And then often, I'll discover that they don't even understand the impact of their problems. Like especially emerging franchise groups, when they say, yeah, we got a 20% close rate, I think, uh-oh, like you guys don't realize, but your franchisees are eating all this cost for their leads to generate those deals. They're not closing enough deals. They're probably barely making ends meet. We've got to help those franchisees thrive. And so we talk about the impact and like, well, why is that not working? And now what's actually happening because of this thing? It's not manipulation. That's actually sometimes just education. That they just don't have the business insight. And it's easy as an outsider looking in to see things. So I think it's the privilege of the sales position sometimes too. But you're not going to get anywhere if you don't build that groundwork with empathy. Where do you go from there, though, Vaughn? Share some more of your wisdom on that part of the selling process.
Well, and so the second most important part is being able to listen. Listen patiently. You're going to ask open-ended questions, who, what, when, where, how. You're going to draw out of them their needs, but you've got to really listen to those needs. And in the background, be translating that into, okay, maybe I can help them with this. Maybe I can do this. This is going to work. This is exactly what they need, but you don't say that because you want to keep getting as much information as you can to fully understand their needs so that you can fully, at the time that it's needed, be able to talk about a solution. But men in particular have a very difficult time listening. And there's probably however many thousands of people that listen to this podcast. There's every man out there is going to grin and nod their head because there's been a woman, a significant woman in their life at some point that says, you never listen to me, because they don't. Men are wired to get just enough information and then solve the problem.
And then on to the next one, on to the
next one, right? Yep. And it not only does it make your significant female other discouraged with you or frustrated with you, it's going to make your prospects discouraged with you because you're not going deep enough into their needs with the questions, but certainly you're not listening enough. And there's no set time limit on that, but and that's some of the instincts that you have to develop through time and practice. But it's listen, really listen, and here's how I teach people to listen and make sure they really listen. It's a 4-step active listening process where, step 2, break your ice, ask the discovery questions. But step 3 is, thanks for sharing that, Dave. Let me make sure I got this right. And you paraphrase back to them what they shared with you as their needs. That's the key and the turn in the lock, because it accomplishes 2 things. One, it displays to whoever you're speaking with, whatever prospective customer you're speaking with, that you listened, and they're always impressed by that. And secondly, if you got something wrong, they're going to tell you about it before you ever go to any kind of presentation of a solution. So you don't step on yourself by making that mistake. But it's being able to temper your patience enough to get through and learn to listen. It's the single, to me, after being empathetic, the single most important and maybe the most difficult aspect of selling is their ability to listen. And it's something that anybody, again, can learn if they're willing to be patient with themselves and practice it. But it's very difficult, particularly for men.
Oh, yeah. I have a hard time just listening to you right now. I'm kidding.
I knew it.
No, it's true though. Like I struggle with that all the time. I hear someone talking like, oh my gosh, I already know the answer to your problem. Or the challenge I've got is I've been doing this for so long now in this industry where the challenges are very similar. Like I could honestly probably not even hear a word they say and then just say, here's what you need to do. But the reality is, inverting the process is toxic. It makes people feel like you're just there to prescribe a solution you don't carry. We've all been to the doctor. You walk in with a cold, and he's like, "Oh, here's a prescription. On to the next one." And you're like, "Wait, but that's not what I'm here for. Like, I have a hip problem, but you just saw the symptom and you ran out the room." That's how people feel when we treat them like that. And you'd mentioned there were 4 steps to active listening. I want to go back and I want to make sure people hear this because this is actionable advice. So you always start with the break the ice, kind of a get to know you. If you don't mind, break down steps 2, 3, and 4. Three we talked about for a while. Your step of pausing to validate and to make sure that you got it right. Because I agree that if you got it wrong, they'll tell you, and if you get it right, sometimes they'll elaborate on it and give you more. But what are steps 2 and 4 in that process?
So 2 is the discovery. Have a list of questions, a script, if you will. And everybody freaks out over scripts because I don't want to sound like a robot or whatever. It's okay. Turn those words into your words, but have a set list of questions that you're going to repeat over and over again, because that's your script. Once you understand what questions are going to uncover the needs, most likely you want to stick with those, because those are your winning questions. It's like Elton John going on stage and playing the same songs every night. Why does he play those same songs every night? Because his audience loves it. They're paying hundreds of dollars, right?
Because it works.
Your audience is going to love it too, because you're playing the song that they want to hear, which is their words coming out of their mouth that are talking about, they're unloading their frustrations, their needs, and you're sitting there nodding like a therapist saying, okay, and you're even making some notes. So I'm going to remember this later. And so it's, how long has this been a problem? What have you tried in the past to overcome this? How much is this costing you? If you found a solution, what would that mean back to you financially? How have you attempted this before? What worked? What didn't work? I mean, there's and it changes from product to product. Certainly, if you're bidding on a home, it's going to be a different set of questions than if you're selling an accounting service. But it's a set of questions tailored to that, and so it's just repeating those questions and then being curious enough to ask probing questions, because the 10 or 12 or 15 questions you're going to ask aren't going to be enough.
No,
You've got to have, that's back to my true empathetic self. I've got to be curious enough to ask a few more probing questions within there. So it's break the ice, ask the discovery questions. The third one is I'm going to repeat back I'm going to paraphrase back an overview of what you just shared with me. And then the fourth, and let me just jump to this. It's one of the biggest challenges I see a lot of salespeople. I mean, I've sat with sales managers and salespeople and asked this question, and I get almost 100% of the time the same response. How do you compare to your competitors? How are you positioned next to your competitors? What do your competitors do that's better than you? What do you do that's better than your competitors? I've got to know my product. Absolutely, I do. But I need to also understand what my competitor's product is better than my competitor. Because listen, they're not getting bids just from you. They're not talking to just you as a resource. They're talking, and they've been on the websites, they've done their searches, they've done their due diligence. You need to know what else they're looking at so you can be prepared to talk about that if in fact it comes up. When you get surprised is when you start slipping in the trust. What does this person really know? Yeah. So you've got to go through this exercise of, and again, I'll go back to this. What do your competitors do that's better than you? And they look at each other, or they look at me with this blank look on their face, and I said, have you been to their website? Gosh, that's a pretty good idea. Yeah, it's a great idea. Go find out what they do so that you're prepared to talk about what they do versus what you do, how you do it. Everybody wants to talk about customer service. But listen, customer service is just a ticket to the game. It's not your customer service. That's the last thing you can compare yourself to. That's true. It's really about the value proposition that you can present that is the most successful solution that you can offer.
Yeah, no, I agree with you 100%. We did an episode on this for franchise development about benchmarking, right? Benchmarking is a critical aspect of the selling process, in my mind, for two reasons. If we come back to how do we sell with empathy and trust, there will be times in the selling process where you will realize their needs do not align with your product. right? Somebody comes into the car dealership and they're looking for something they can tow a trailer with, and you've just got minivans and sedans on your lot. Like, you are not selling a car that day. And if you are, then you're a bad person, because you're not going to meet their needs. Don't sell them a minivan and weld a hitch underneath the bottom of it. Like, that's unsafe, right? So sometimes you need to understand the landscape, because I've sent people away before and said, look, you're not looking for me. This is where I could help you. But what you're really looking for is this. And I'll introduce you to my, quasi competitor. I don't really look at them that way, but there are people that do things that I do, and I do things better than they do, and vice versa. I've sent business away to someone who I knew was the right match. And you know what happens? Is they send me referrals. Or when I see them at events, they trust me and they'll introduce me to their friends, right? And because it's more about that, in my mind, having integrity at the end of the day, than about making a few extra bucks. Those few extra bucks will cost me more bucks in the end, because they'll be unhappy. We'll go through training. It won't work. They'll realize they needed something different. They won't trust me. Then they'll tell their friends they had a bad experience with me. That the cost of that sale is so much. It's exponentially more expensive to make that sale than to let it go away.
And let me talk to that point for a second, because I had about a $75 million a year marketing budget. And we sponsored the Los Angeles Clippers, the Lakers, the Dodgers, the Angels, the Anaheim Ducks. We spent a ton on sports marketing. You still see CarMax's logos all over the NBA. Because the original CEO was a big college basketball player. Most of the executives at that time were college basketball players that big into basketball, and I didn't play much basketball, but they loved it. But we were also one of the biggest radio advertisers, etc. But you know what proved to be our best advertising? The last happy customer that walked out the door.
Yeah, word of mouth.
Word of mouth. That's the single best advertising. And to your point, if I solve or can find a way to solve their problem and then in turn solve it, they're going to be your best advertiser. And fortunately for me, almost all of my business comes from referrals. My client retention, I still have the first 2 clients I signed up 9 years ago with me. But it's because I work extra hard continuing to deliver their needs, and in multiple ways. And so client retention is determined by that. Client acquisition is determined by that. Your reputation is determined by that. Your future customers is determined by providing their needs. And at the same time, when you say no, and I have, to your point, sometimes they'll say, when they're at a networking event or a cocktail party or talking to somebody else, and that person is describing some kind of situation where they need a solution, they say, oh, I talked to this guy, Dave. He couldn't help me because of this or so, but I think he can help you. Let me give you Dave's number.
Yeah, exactly.
100%.
Our top referral, like our top revenue source, lead source, is referrals by far, still is. So we've got, but it's because you didn't say it in these words, but this is the philosophy I like to follow. There's reputation over revenue, right? People over profits. And so if you live your life that way and you're selling that way, where you're truly being empathetic, you're understanding what their real needs are, you're understanding what the competitive landscape is and how you can attach and align those things together, then you can give people advice, and you're in an advisory role rather than in a sales role. And that's the sweet spot. That's the sweet spot. Vaughn, any parting thoughts? I just realized you and I have already dug into this topic. I feel like we've got another 3 layers we could do, 4 layers in this topic alone. But
let's come back and do that. But so parting words. I assure you that if you are a franchise owner, if you're a consultant in franchising, if you're a franchise development expert within your franchise, there's ways. You don't know what you don't know. Dave and I have been lifelong readers. I read the same How to Win Friends and Influence People back in the 70s. It's been around, I think, since the 40s. It's probably the one most important book around life and certainly selling. I think it's mandatory reading for everybody. But I've been a sales nerd since I was 17 years old when I started selling men's suits and figuring out how I could beat this other guy that was outselling me in men's suits. It was very competitive, right? But I started reading books, but Dave and I can both tell you those books all say essentially the same thing, but in different ways. It's what I've shared with you today. And you too can improve your sales approach by educating yourself, getting some help, and practicing. Everybody can be highly successful in selling if you understand the fundamentals and approach it with the proper mindset and tools. And go find that help. There's lots of resources out there. Visit me at rdltraining.com. I'd be more than happy to talk to you about it. Maybe I can, maybe I can't. I've helped hundreds, but may not be able to help you, but I'd love to find out. And at least let's have a conversation. I can probably give you some ideas of how to solve your for zero cost, free consultation, whatever you want to talk about. I give away more stuff than I probably should, but come on, let's talk about it. And let's see if we can't point you in a direction to help you improve your client acquisition and retention. So I'd love to have that opportunity.
Yeah, well, Vaughn, I think that if they get nothing else out of this, they've at least understood that they're not going to get a pushy conversation. They're going to get some advice and some empathy, and you'll truly help understand their needs. This has been awesome. We'll do another one, maybe a part 2, because I feel like we've got a lot more to cover on this topic. But thanks for all your advice today, Vaughn. Really nice having you on the show.
It's been a true pleasure, Dave. Thank you for having me, and I look forward to talking to you again.
Likewise, thanks.